Good morning, and thank you for having me on. I'm Ajay Rajadeksh. I run global macro research at Barclays Capital, based out of New York. And today I'll give you guys what I think of as a global macro overview, where the world and its financial markets stand right now. Now, in general, I would say that the world's economic response to the COVID recession has arguably been a resounding success. Faced last March with the steepest decline in activity in memory, countries and policymakers responded with unprecedented monetary and fiscal policy support. And the end result has actually been a V shaped recovery. The United States of the major economies went past pre COVID GDP levels by the second quarter of 2021, which is pretty sharp as the recovery goes. The EU, the euro area, will do the same in the fourth quarter. China crossed this threshold even earlier by the end of the second quarter of 2020. And this recovery, this V shape, has happened in spite of repeated COVID surges across the world in 2021. In fact, as I sit here, my own country, the United States, the 7 day average of daily COVID cases is again over 150,000. And it hasn't stopped the economy from coming back. Contrast this with 2008's Great Recession, where many countries took far longer to recover. So I would say so far, so good. But the question that clients are going to turn to, the question that we are turning to is what comes next? And I would say I have three major points to make here. First, the world is slowing down as 2022 nears. And it's slowing down in some ways for expected reasons and some for unexpected. But for the most part, it's not a huge surprise. The United States and China have slowed more than expected. Yes, we think that the second quarter in 2021 was the strongest for the US. China arguably peaked growth wise at the end of last year. We have repeatedly reduced our 2021 forecasts for China, not repeatedly, but we have reduced our 2021 forecast for China and the United States over the last few months. The second quarter in the US was a little bit weaker than expected. The third quarter is tracking lower as well. But more importantly than that, we expect the US to grow 2.5 to 3% next year, depending on the size of new fiscal stimulus. This is not the end of the world. Developed economies do not grow at an annual 6% ad infinitum. The US will grow at a little over 6% this year, despite everything I've just said. And that we know is not sustainable. And the euro area continues to be a very pleasant upside surprise. But I guess my main point is whether it is production constraints, new COVID surges in the West, or other factors like China's zero tolerance policy on Delta, the fact that Chinese authorities are willing to impose new localized lockdowns, whatever the reason, global growth is clearly downshifting in coming quarters. The world economy will grow at over 6% in 2021. It will probably grow at closer to 4.5 in 2022. And this, again, despite the euro area finally really doing well. The next theme I would push is that I do think bond markets will continue to keep the faith on inflation. Spot inflation prints in the United States and recently in the euro area as well have surprised sharply to the upside for months in the US. And yet, bond markets have been remarkably unruffled. They have agreed wholesale with the Fed's view that this inflation is transitory. Yes, maybe the definition of transitory is up for debate, but that this will not lead to a self perpetuating cycle where the Fed loses inflation credibility, that inflation will ease next year. As it happens, I actually agree with this belief. I think fears of central banks falling behind the inflation curve and losing inflation credibility are vastly overstated. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first, just start with the numbers themselves. Core CPI in the United States is running as we speak at about 4.5%. Now, that's a very high number, but here's the rub: hotels, new and used cars, car rentals, airline fares and furniture are 14% of the core CPI basket. Take that 14% out, and core CPI is running at a little below 2%. Now, the immediate question is, well, how can you take that out? That is the part that is causing inflation. The reason that you take it out is because if you create an index of these five sectors, you find that it had virtually no inflation pressures. It showed virtually no inflation pressures in 2019 or 18 or 17 or 16. Seems like the definition of transitory. It is the COVID sensitive sectors. The other is the absolute levels where some of these sectors are. So car rentals in the United States currently are 80% above December 2018 levels. I mean, honestly, that is not sustainable. That is not going to continue for a long period of time going forward. Used cars are 40% above. Yes, they've gone up more than anyone expected, but it's not clear what has structurally changed. I would say I keep thinking of this US recovery, of the global recovery, and especially the price pressures associated with that due to supply chain constraints. I think of that as similar to an upside down ketchup bottle. The analogy is not mine, it's the Financial Times economics editor Martin Sandbu, but it's a nice analogy. I like it. An upside down ketchup bottle, there's a bunch of ketchup clogged in the middle. And as a result, you are seeing price pressures. You have had ships end up at the wrong ports. You have had automakers pull back on their semiconductor chips orders too far and then be surprised by by the extent to which demand for cars went up, etc., etc. But to extend our analogy, at some point the ketchup comes down with a splat. In that case, it's gravity. Here, it's the passage of time. And that is exactly what I think will happen. And more importantly, that is exactly what the bond market thinks will happen going forward. The other reason why bonds have been so comfortable with near-term inflation pressures, why we believe that the central bank will not lose inflation credibility, is just the weight of history. Pre-COVID was not that long ago. It was only 18 months ago. And remember where we were pre-COVID. In Jan of 2020, for example, just before COVID started to take off in the Western world, the US unemployment rate was at 3.5%. The US Fed funds rate was at 1.75, the Fed having cut 75 basis points over the prior 12 months. And yet, core inflation was not at 2%, it was below 2%. Market implied medium term core inflation, as implied through market instruments like 5-year CPI swaps, was also well below 2%. The point I'm making is that in 2020, just before COVID, bond markets were telling you that even when the US did not have significant economic slack, even when it did not have a lot of labor market slack, 1.75% was too high a Fed funds rate to sustainably generate 2% inflation. Since then, we had a very sharp recession in COVID. But the funny thing was, it was quite short. It was 2 quarters, that's it. And then we had a V shaped recovery. But when I talk to clients, increasingly the narrative I get, and again, it's a narrative that I agree with at this point, is that we've had a very, very large fiscal stimulus. Absolutely. We've had a very large pop in growth and in inflation. Absolutely. But all of those factors will start to fade. And when we come out on the other side, it is not clear at all that the world looks that different from pre COVID. And where were we pre COVID? It wasn't a terrible world, but it was a world in Jan 2020 when wage inflation and inflation pressures were muted, even with virtually everyone in the US economy employed. That is what bond markets are pricing in. A well behaved bond market has been a benign backdrop to the risk rally all summer. And I think that it will continue into the fall. Concerns over a taper tantrum are overdone, even though we expect actual tapering to start by year end. Now, a word about the taper. So our belief is that the US Central Bank will announce at the September FOMC that they are thinking about it, will confirm at the November FOMC, will start tapering in December. And this is despite the disappointment in August payrolls that we've seen recently. I think the Fed just wants to delink the tapering decision from the decision on the hiking cycle. They have repeatedly made that point. They made it in the FOMC minutes recently. Chairman Powell made it in his congressional testimony. They keep telling us that the decision to taper is delinked, is not linked to the decision to eventually hike. And the other point is, even when the Fed decides to taper, they will still be buying hundreds of billions of dollars further of bonds before they finally move to the sidelines. We think that that happens by the middle of next year. So the Fed signals in September, announces in November, starts in December, probably is done by the middle of 2022, and then sits and waits to see what happens to the economy, how it handles this implied lack of further policy easing. And then finally, I keep getting asked questions about this, so I'm going to bring up the topic. Is China's recent policy shifts? Now, look, China is slowing down. It is slowing down primarily for cyclical reasons, but for some structural reasons also. But for the most part, that slowdown is not linked to the decisions that China has made in terms of its regulatory clampdown, whether it be in the educational technology sector, whether it be in the consumer facing tech sector, whether it be the large fines that they've imposed on their own companies. US listed Chinese names are down massively this year. The NASDAQ Golden Dragon China Index at one point was down about 50% in 2021. But here's the funny thing. Local Chinese A shares on the Shanghai Comp, for example, are not down remotely that much. And there is a reason for that. The fact is that these Chinese actions seem to be targeting a certain set of companies which have three things in common. One is they have what the Chinese believe, rightly or wrongly, to be opaque funding structures, usually listed on Western stock exchanges, and they have large amounts of data. That's one, and that includes the actions taken against Chinese names like Didi, and the actions taken against a bunch of other big Chinese tech names. The second is places where social priorities have shifted, which has obviously affected the edutech sector. And the third is places where the Chinese are worried about non-bank financing continuing to grow, which we believe was one of the reasons why they moved against Ant Financial towards the end of last year. You add this all up, and we are talking about a certain sector of economies being impacted, but there's a couple of things. One is we believe that the macro impact is limited, number one. Number two, we believe that the vast majority of abrupt moves are done. Any future moves we expect to be evolutionary or not revolutionary. We do not think that China is turning away from the market reforms that drove its decades long economic miracle. Indeed, I would argue that the bigger risk to China's growth comes from the zero tolerance slash lockdown policy that the government continues to pursue. Most recently, they closed one of the largest ports in the world because they found one case of COVID. Now, in our baseline, the third quarter is the weakest quarter in China thanks to localized lockdowns, followed by a mild rebound in the fourth quarter and in the first quarter of next year. So this is the global outlook as a whole. The world is slowing down. It is slowing down a little bit more than expected in the US and China. It is doing better than expected in the Euro area and in some other emerging market countries. Progress on vaccinations continues. Fears over inflation are vastly overdone. And we are going to end up in a world that is not that dissimilar to where we were pre-COVID. So if that is our worldview, then what does that mean for asset allocation? And for the last 12 months or so, from an asset allocation standpoint, we have been overweight global equities over global fixed income, not because we expected bond yields to rise to the moon. Far from that. As you can make out from everything I've said over the last 15 minutes, we expected bond yields to have a gentle grind higher. Our forecast for the 10-year for the end of this year is about 1.7%. We are at 135 or so. And that 1.7 is not very high. We were above that in March of 2021, if you guys remember. Now our asset allocation call is a little bit of a more difficult call, because we are looking at a slower 2022. There is the upcoming taper. At the margin, the delta surge, even though we don't expect new lockdowns in the Western world, the delta surge at the margin will keep people on the sidelines. And obviously, valuations are higher than 3 months ago or 6 months ago. Forced to choose, though, we still prefer equities over fixed income. One of the big themes in equities markets have been the absolutely stunning corporate earnings recovery that we've seen over the last 9 to 12 months. So economies have come back faster than expected, but even more than that, corporate earnings have still beyond that been turbocharged. 2021's earnings for the S&P 500, as an example, will be way above 2019 levels. Now, our view is that there are more earnings upside surprises to come relative to consensus. And the fact is that TINA, there is no alternative, is a real thing. Real yields on most high quality fixed income assets remain punishingly low. We also agree with the market implied view that as and when the Fed starts hiking, it will end up at a lower point on the Fed funds rate at the very end than in the last cycle. So the path of least resistance, even now, is still for equities to outperform bonds. It won't be a smooth path, especially with the Fed set to taper. I think fall and 2022 is likely to be more exciting than summer, which was pretty quiet for the most part. But that is the world that I think we are going to, which is, you had your excitement, you had a big pop in growth, in inflation, and fiscal stimulus across the world, and now the baton on the economic recovery has been passed from the US and China to the Euro area. But net net, when we come into 2022, we are transitioning back to a slower growth, lower inflation world. I'm going to limit my remarks to this, but thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to interacting with you guys in person next time.